Okay, at the end of the last video that I posted, I'd just finished with start of injection map there, which is the first one, which we're calling 0, and then I'd done the second map, which we're going to call number 1. Since then I've gone on to do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So I've got 9 start of injection maps completed. Now I've come back to this at the moment for the simple reason of trying to explain a little bit more about start of injection and the map. So what I'll do is I'll click on this last one. Right, there we are. So that's the map. I've got milligrams per stroke across the top here. I've got revs per minute down the side, and I've got an apparent output which, as you can see, has got lots of 60s and 70s on it, so it's got quite large numbers on it. Now when it comes to start of injection, you need to stop and think about what do you mean by start of injection. Now, to old timers like me who worked on cars before a lot of this stuff existed, we used to talk about timing, and there would always be 2 lots of timing, in the sense that there would be timing for when the inlet and exhaust valves opened and shut, and in those days that was not variable, so it was they were either open or shut, and you didn't have any variables involved. And the other timing would be when you wanted some kind of spark ignition to occur, and in a petrol engine obviously that would be when the spark plug's fired, and in a diesel engine you would govern that by when you injected the fuel. But because in those days most things were mechanical, they were fairly closely linked together. Now that we've got electronic control of what's going on, simple diesels like the EDC15 with the PD injectors have still got a fairly basic mechanical timing system to open and close the valves, and so we can really ignore that. That has been set by whoever last changed the cam belt, and they set it with setting tools, so it should be correct. So we can really ignore that. So what we're looking on here is, as we've said, start of injection. So it's timing for the injection process, and that is not controlled by mechanics anymore. It is in the sense that the injectors are opened and closed by a cam, so obviously that's mechanical. But when the actual injector opens itself and fires the fuel out and then stops firing the fuel out, so in other words, when the start of this process will occur and how long it will occur for, that is under the ECU control. So the only thing the cam has done is pump up pressure inside the injector so that the injector can work. Now that means that we've got an area in which we can work. The ECU can work within the area that the injector is on the cam, because obviously before that there is no pressure in the injector, and after that we've lost the injection pressure. So we're talking about a slot of time which in this case is measured in crankshaft rotation, or degrees of crankshaft rotation. Now start of injection, well, what we'd really like is injection somewhere around about 0 degrees before top dead center, or you could call that 0 degrees after top dead center, because 0 is 0. And so the figures that we're going to see on a start of injection map are going to be related to that 0 point. Now then we have to look at this and ask ourselves, do they make any sense? Because these are quite large numbers, and if we go back and look at duration numbers are reasonable sizes, but they're nothing like this large. So we have to say to ourselves, what do these numbers actually represent? Now if we've got numbers of about 70 like we have here, it is unlikely that that represents 70 degrees before top dead center, and it's unlikely that it represents 70 degrees after top dead center. So there's something a little bit odd about these numbers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this one, and down here where we've got the factor and the offset, we've got no offset. What I'm going to do in there is I'm going to put minus 78. Now that's a number that you can find on chip tuning forums and on the internet related to injection pump timing. So I'm going to put in there minus 78, and I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to have a look at the numbers again. Now you could argue that they've gone all funny because there's lots of minuses, and I've even got a minus 0. We'll take minus 0 to mean 0. Now the figures now don't look though quite so daft as they did, because if we look at what we've got now, if these figures were before top dead center, then I would have minus 25 degrees before top dead center, which wouldn't make any sense, because that would make the start of injection 25 degrees after before top dead center, because it's a negative number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a guess that these numbers actually represent after top dead center. So in other words, 0 is 0 degrees after top dead center. Now if I go minus 1 after top dead center, then that presumably would mean 1 degree before top dead center. So by the time I get over here and I've got 24 and 25, but they're minus numbers, if I've got minus 25 degrees after top dead center, I'm going to assume that that is 25 degrees before top dead center. So I'm going to ignore these minuses in my own mind when I'm looking at this, and I'm going to say to myself, okay then, so what I've got is 0 here, so that's top dead center, and this is 2.95, so that's roughly 3 degrees before top dead center, and this one over here is 25.5, so that's roughly 26 degrees before top dead center. And I'm going to say to myself, well, does this now make any sense to me? Well, the easy way of asking that and answering it is to go and look at the duration maps again, isn't it? Because if I go back and search for a duration map, that looks like it might be a duration map. No, I haven't gone back far enough, so I'm not paying enough attention here. I keep going back. What have we got here? That's it. There's a duration map. So let's assume that that's a duration map. Oh, it's one I haven't bothered to change yet, so we won't use that one. Let's go and see if is there another one near the beginning? Let's try that one. Yep, that one's got my figures on it. Right. Now this one obviously won't be a minus or a plus, because this one is not related to when the timing should occur. It is just a time. But so let's have a look at this one and look at some of the figures. I've got numbers that run up to about 29, so let's call that one 30 degrees. So let's say we've got a maximum of 30 degrees. Ignore the minuses. I suspect that when the ECU deals with a minus, it represents 0, and so it just doesn't inject. But let's assume that that's 30 degrees. So at the highest milligrams per stroke and the highest revs, I'll assume 30 degrees. So we'll remember that number, 30 degrees. And then I'll go back and I'll look at my start of injection. At the highest revs and at the highest milligram injection, I've got minus 25.5. Now remember, I decided I would call that 25.5 before top dead center. So if I've got this right, then in my mind I am starting an injection time that's going to take 30 degrees, and when I start it, I'm starting at roughly 25 degrees. So I will have 25 degrees of crankshaft rotation, then I'll have an extra 5 degrees after top dead center, and then I'll stop injecting. Now that doesn't sound too ridiculous, because what I would like to do is inject as close to 0 as I possibly can. I would like to inject and burn the fuel at top dead center, But if I've got to inject quite a lot of fuel, I obviously can't go too early. I can't just keep going earlier and earlier and earlier. So it looks to me like the designers have gone for about 25, 26 and decided that they can live with the fact that it might not finish injecting until 5 degrees after top dead center. So that is what I think these figures are representing. I won't go any further with this, and I should point out that not all ECUs use the -78. So in other words, the designers seem to use after top dead center as a measurement, and then you will need to put in an offset of -78. If the designers have used a fixed point for before top dead center, then you won't need the -78, and you'll instantly know anyway, because the figures that you see, if there is no -78 involved, these figures will be these sort of numbers. In other words, they will be around about 0 to 25, something like that, but without the minus sign. So if the numbers initially come out and they are similar to the duration numbers, then you do not have to make any further changes. But if the numbers look much too high, like they're up in the 70s, then you probably have to use an offset of -78. You will only decide on this obviously when you look at different files. Right, now what I'm going to do then is I'm going to close that one down, and I'm going to go back so that I know where I was. So I'm going to go back to, oh, there we are. So I'm going to go back to the end of start of injection, and I'm going to stop there.